Hey, so I'm 7 months into my first ever software engineering job, and one of the things I realized is that it's like really, really hard to understand and get onboarded to the sort of like tribal knowledge that exists in the company. One of the interesting things about software is that everything moves so fast that the way that a company does something in 1 year can be very different than the way a company does that thing in another year. And then also, like, even from like quarter to quarter, things can change dramatically. The traditional way to counteract this is with documentation. So every time you make an update to a system, ideally, you document the changes that you've made such that someone completely new to the system can come on, read the most up-to-date documentation, and get totally caught up to speed about why things are the way they are. I work on a huge code base at work. It's like 8 different repositories, and each of them has like thousands and thousands of lines of code. There's no way I could understand it just by looking at the code, so I have to read documentation. The issue with the documentation is that it's very rarely kept up to date in my experience, and I don't think this is particular to Roblox, but it really seems that all of the burden of documentation falls upon the engineers. One of the unfortunate things is that, companies don't actually incentivize you to document your code. If anything, you might be rewarded for having all this tribal knowledge stored in your head if you've been around a company for a while, because then you're necessary. You've sort of like planted your roots in the company, and then everyone needs to come to you when they have questions about this esoteric part of the code base. So for both those reasons, engineers aren't really incentivized to document well. First of all, they're sort of obliquely incentivized for keeping all that tribal knowledge in their heads, and then it's really hard to track the impact of documentation. The people that suffer from lack of documentation are often the newest engineers with the least pull in a company, and it's hard for directors to see that impact until many, many years down the line after the documentation's been written. One of the issues is that documentation is like a public good. It's sort of like a road in that no one person wants to pay the cost up front to pay for it, but then once it exists, it benefits everyone. So I think this is really one of the unsolved problems in tech, the issue of knowledge sharing effectively. So what can we do about it? Well, when I want to learn something, I always end up going to YouTube. There's thousands of tutorials out there about how to do pretty much anything you want to accomplish. And those are made by people who are experts in their field. You can get up to speed on a complex or new technology in seconds because of the myriad of videos out there for things how to like create a web app or how to spin up a Docker container. Unfortunately, we don't have the same mindset within companies. So I think there's probably space within companies to have sort of like in-house content creators. I would love to see a future where principal engineers are incentivized to maybe once a quarter sit down and make a YouTube video, walking a new engineer through how to navigate a code base. Just some thoughts, but I think it could be a huge value add. One of the problems we're gonna have to solve is how to incentivize this sort of behavior, especially since, like I said, documentation is a public good within tech companies. I don't have all the answers, but I know I would love to live in a future where I could join a completely new tech company, search up on some internal portal how to do XYZ, and have someone that's been there since day one explain it to me. And spreading that kind of knowledge also adds a lot of value to companies. So probably something there. I think I'm going to start pursuing this as my 20% project. This idea was popularized by Google, but essentially it's the idea probably based on Pareto's principle that you should spend 80% of your time doing your normal work, but then 20% of your time investing in some moonshot project that you think could be really special. And in fact, some of the most famous Google products actually started as 20% projects that employees wanted to invest 20% of their time in. Gmail and AdSense are just 2 examples from what I've read. Yeah, this idea of documentation and teaching others, I find it really interesting, and I think it should exist in the world when it doesn't. So I'm probably gonna get building.